Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. Cheers. I'm having a little bit of mate here. Oh, that's some good stuff. Very quiet here in the jungle. Not a motion. Anyway, I want to share something with you. That is a fascinating perspective, and I'm sure, um, I'm sure people, not everybody, but some people have the capacity to take this perspective, and it's fascinating. And if any kind of control that you have in life, it's gotta be this. Okay? Now, there's something I've noticed within my consciousness. And because your consciousness is not different from my consciousness, meaning you will see the same thing. Because I've noticed something about consciousness, not the content of consciousness. Does that make sense? So there's this point of perspective, very deep, which has the capacity to see the faculty of the soul, the faculty of the mind, and the faculty of the body, or logos eros, magic's fantasia, logic's erotics. Okay? So there are these three eyes. They really are eyes that you can look at particular experience, or I don't want to say problem, but a challenge or a puzzle or whatever, right? That game. Okay? Now, I want you to notice something. Now, whatever's happening in front of you, okay, you can deal with it in one of the three ways. One thing that I want to point out that I always talk about, but I always say that that's not the only faculty that you gotta use in this experience of consciousness, this game of life. But I always point out to the attention and awareness. So, whenever something's going on in front of you, you can look at the whole thing, the whole stream of information that's going on. You can look at it, for example, in one particular way and pointing your heart at it. You're looking through the eye of the heart. And that is attention, not intention. You're not trying to do anything with it. You are looking with that attention, pure, placing pure attention without any intention to do anything. That's what your heart does. It just shines that light. Okay, so you can any point in space-time experience that you are, you can point your heart at it. And it usually may be something that is sort of like uncomfortable emotional experience or whatnot, right? And that particular thing requires you looking through that primordial attention, which has no intention of changing it, just looking at it. And it's doing its all, the whole thing. You just need to point your heart at it. And it's going to take care of it, really. Okay? So that is one type of challenge that arises within consciousness. Okay? Now, what we normally sometimes do, we point logics at it. Okay? Because notice that. I'm not just saying words. Notice the function of your consciousness. There might be this negative feeling inside of you, and logics, you can look at it with a logical lens or the eye. And when you do that, what is it doing? It's analyzing, right? Analyzing, making conclusions, it's computing. But you just pointed the binary computer at the quantum problem. Basically, that's what you did. So don't be surprised that it's just going to create all sorts of belief in systems and copes, which then you're going to have to destroy and go directly and look at it directly. That's what's going to happen, right? So, but notice when that is happening, okay? This time space continuum, that stream of information that's happening, that always happens in your feelings, emotions, images, or thoughts and sensations, right? It has all these layers of consciousness in any point in time, and at any point in time, you can point your heart at it if it's required, if there is that type of negative feeling there. And sometimes we may have times of life where it's required a lot, and I'm gonna get into this in a second. And sometimes it is already taken care of, and you don't really need to specifically point your heart at it because everything is peaceful and great in that space, right? But I just want you to notice, this is what I started seeing. What am I pointing at this particular situation? If I'm pointing my logics and then I'm seeing it creating all sorts of blockages, which is a belief systems, and just making it all worse and it's make you feel bad, you immediately can say, "Oh, look what I'm doing. I'm pointing my logics in on my psyche within myself, basically onto that negative feeling, which is incoherence." And because what logics do, when you're going to point your logics or this analytical mind to it, it's immediately going to do its thing. It can't help it. It's going to do its thing. It's going to analyze, it's going to dissect, it's going to try to help you with it. But it can never help you with that. It's not built for that. Okay? It is built for something external. And it's useful there. And I just want to say or call it frame control. Your logical mind is good for the frame control, not the state control. Okay? But what I'm trying to say here is just notice what you're doing with every single point of time-space experience. And notice that you have that capacity to point your heart at it, that attention. And awareness. And notice as soon as you do it, it's taking care of it. Okay? Now, so at any point in time space experience, you can point your heart at it, you can point your mind at it, or your body at it. In other words, your analytical mind, which is the body, or imaginary or imagination, which is the real mind. If you point your mind at it, it's also going to try to help you with that and come up with all sorts of solutions, right? But it's going to use magics. And if you have not pointed your heart at it and there's a negative feeling, what kind of images the mind is going to be creating, right? And so, of course, you can see that these are all going to be negative and the dark types of thoughts. Okay? So this is what's going to stem from you pointing imagination onto that problem, which is in the world of feelings. Okay, so as you can see, you can look, you can at any point in time you can try it, you see it, okay? Even right now in this moment. Now what would happen if I point my imaginary mind onto the feeling that is kind of negative? What would happen right now in this moment, for example? What kind of images is producing? Now of course I don't have a negative feeling right now, but if there was, you can notice that I can do that, and you can do that. You can point your imaginary or imagination capacity onto the feeling. Okay? And if you do this prematurely, before you alchemize everything, it's going to start creating all sorts of negative pictures and the negative dreams, even. It is misappropriation of the mind. Okay? And also notice if you start pointing the analytical mind to it, notice what it's doing. It's analyzing, oh, but it's this. It's like, yeah, but this isn't right. It isn't moral. But then, there is a need that we have to accomplish. How we're going to accomplish this need without breaking the morality? Like it's doing all that stuff that the mind is doing. The analytical mind is doing, which is a brain or the body. That sphere, your avatar, basically. It has a computer, it's a calculating computer, right? Now, just start noticing the use of those three faculties, pointing to the states that you are in. Okay? You will notice immediately that the first thing that you gotta do is probably to start pointing your heart at it until there's peace and some degree of bliss as a background of your consciousness. There's that infinity there. Now, in this particular moment, as I'm pointing, I feel it's doing something and I feel it in my throat. Right? But I'm not doing anything, I'm just observing with that original eye. But the thing with that original eye is that what it's doing, it's kind of snake eating its tail. It's consuming anything that is separate from itself. So then another way of saying it, the observer is observed. If you really watch that negative feeling deep, eventually it's going to go and it's going to turn into this peace bliss. Okay, and that is the correct use of pointing your heart at that particular problem. That's where it all starts. If you point your imaginary mind or analytical mind, it will do what it can do with that negative feeling, and it will always create something negative. And even if you use your will and you have that negative feeling inside of you and you're using your will to visualize something, forcing and quote unquote training your mind to do this, the things that you may imagine, they may come to pass, but they will have a quality of that incompleteness because this is exactly where from you were trying to create it. Okay? So what does that mean? That means, if it's indeed the case, just obviously watch it for yourself. If it is indeed the case, to me it's quite obvious right now. I can be interacting with anybody, because to me right now, everything I see, it's, a holographic projection. People are here, they're talking to me, they're avatars. And every time there's an interaction, there's my heart, my soul, that has the capacity to place attention. Am I listening to them with my heart, or am I listening with my imagination or my logics? Okay, the first thing that of course you gotta do is start listening to them with your heart. It is a type of listening of the sound itself, of the motion itself, of just the stream of information. You're listening like the source of the stream of information, if you will. And when you do that, because normally when a person comes to you, they come for that reason. You won't be able to have any kind of harmony with that person or any kind of collaboration unless this process it is done, unless that type of separation between you two is dissolved. And therefore that's why it's so important to just listen with your heart. At that particular time, you maybe notice that it doesn't matter what they say, because usually at the beginning it doesn't. Okay, because you can see that the problem has not been presented to your logical mind yet, and so it's all heart at this point. And unless the problem has been presented to your logical mind, you don't switch it to the logical mind. Right? Okay? Now, sometimes there is a need to point your logical mind, but it's usually the problem is going to be presented to you in terms of external arrangement of physical reality, right? If you're organizing some event, you need to count how many chairs you're gonna need. You know, if you're buying something in store, that's your, to buy list and to do list. All of these different things that needs the logical mind to be functioning. Okay. And if somebody asks you a question about something specifically like that, then you engage your logical mind and you do that thing. Use it appropriately when it's necessary. But if you use your logical mind and point logical mind, but again, I'm trying to say, because the control is about pointing that aperture, either your heart, either your mind, either your body. What I'm trying to say here, guys, is that is the only point of actual control that you have in this video game. Okay? Why? Because when you point your logical mind at the problem, it is automatic. When you point your magical mind or imagination at the problem, it is automatic. When you point your heart at that problem, it is automatic. You do not have a degree of control within that if you want to use it appropriately. Because does that make sense of what I'm saying? When you throw the problem at the computer, it's doing its thing. Okay? So only throw the problem at the computer that is needed and necessary. If you are interacting with a human being and you're pointing your analytical mind and all these emotions are there, right? And from these emotion, negative emotions, incoherent emotions rather, there are thoughts that like, oh, you know, that person is like that, or that person is fat, or that person is, see what I'm trying to say, like the judging thing. That's why sometimes people say like, don't judge the people because it's not nice. No, you don't judge the people because that is inappropriate use of your logics. And really the real reason of you not using that, not misappropriating that, it is because it builds up a certain type of toxicity within your system that then can spill over in other people as well. Okay, so you just basically don't misappropriate the logics. It is very simple to do so, because as soon as you point your heart at it, there's no space for the logics to come in. And also, I have to say, when you're listening with your heart, and if you go really, really deeply through it, it's such a, again, I just have to say this, but there is no seeking of that. I just have to say that there is this type of almost like a ecstatic touching of the sound, the motion, which is the person in that moment, and there's this amazing feeling. Okay, let's just say that there's just like an amazing feeling. So to truly, truly listen to somebody, even though at first you may not really want to point your heart at it, but if you do, and you open up sufficiently and your attention is right, it is it is amazing. That energy is amazing. Okay, and so that will give the best possible chance for that person to feel good, because they have been listened to. Okay, and that's the true mastery of listening, I suppose, right? And honestly, like everywhere you go or everything you do, in a way, the good rule of thumb is to have your heart pointed at it, at that primordial feeling, because everything has that primordial feeling. Okay, so there's this things are great on the world of the soul. Okay, now only then the the imagination, the magical mind, is worth to be pointed at that thing, now that there's a nice feeling. Okay, and then you let that nice feeling to become your imagination. Okay, and then that nice feeling will start moving and become even nicer, and perhaps deliver some images in your mind. Now that is real creative process. Okay, now you're using the world of magics appropriately whenever in your soul there are these beautiful feelings, and then you use that. And as you can see, it's not, there's no brute force here, there's no conflict here. You're just letting that seed, that germ, that wonderful feeling of peaceful and blissful feeling, to sprout into some melody through the use of your imagination. Okay? And so it creates that. And everything in your imagination is super duper enjoyable. And this particular process, it's called theurgy and thaumaturgy. Theurgy is after alchemy. There is a process of theurgy, which is what do you do with that peaceful, blissful energy, and it starts sort of sprouting in some sort of spontaneous melody, which are these like amazing feelings that feel like ether. And then the mind interprets that and turns it into thaumaturgy, which is what kind of form that's going to take. Does that make sense? Because the mind will then take that, interpret, and see what you can create. And so if the feeling is something, right, is happening, then you can, maybe your mind is going to imagine a poem. Maybe your mind is going to imagine some sort of event, whatever that may be. Right? It takes that and does that. Now, what that's going to be is not an imposition. The mind does not say that make this to be that. What the mind does, it says like, okay, what's going to grow out of this melody of feelings? What's going to come out of it? And then the mind does that. Okay? And that's going to be the product. What I'm suggesting here is that the feeling, that gem that you discovered within yourself, has already containing what kind of flower is going to come out of that seed. Right? It just makes sense. If you plant one particular species of the plant, when it's going to flower, it's going to flower that particular species of the plant, right? So there's no any kind of imposition. If you have a gem that is about like, I don't know, it may be a simple gem. It's like having a good time with your friends, right? And if when you use imagination, that's the images that are appearing to you, and you're enjoying that type of scenario, then that's that. It may be some creative thing that's coming up for whatever your creative work, and you start seeing that, then that's that, right? There's no imposition. And it appears that we have many of these feelings sort of almost like a packed in those little gems. And each little gem is a combination of them and that particular manifestation. And all of this, without going into deeply, you can observe it by yourself, right? The message of this particular video is about capacity of pointing appropriate faculty of your consciousness to that particular problem. Okay? And what I'm suggesting here is that you do not use your logics or magics for your negative emotions, whatever that may be, like fear, anxiety, depression, whatever. You don't use your magics or logics. You use logos. Okay? Or eros. And in reality, it's both. You gotta, there's, if you're a man, you're gonna be logos heavy. If you're a woman, you're gonna be eros heavy, which is you're gonna be more of the openness. And if you're a man, it's gonna be more of the piercing through it. Okay? And so there's this game. You use appropriately. Now, sometimes you may have a problem that is requires a logical solution or action-based problem. Okay? That problem may also appear as a sort of like, tension. Okay? Because it turns out that your to-do list is already within your consciousness. And it may feel like that a little bit of a tension, within your body, mind, if you will. This is what I've just been discovering. And I was looking at that, it's like, oh, this is not that soul feeling. This is, and I cannot use my logos to take care of that, right? It's like saying like, all right, there's a problem that needs to be resolved. I have to calculate how many things I need for that thing. So I'm just gonna, and there's a little bit of like that tension there inside of you, and then so I'm gonna just point my heart to it, and it's gonna take care of it. There's gonna be a misappropriation of logos, and it's not going to work, and the shit is not gonna be done, right? And this is the problem sometimes when people discover that existence of that logos and think, oh, this is a solution for everything. No, it is not. It is absolutely not solution for everything, and it is absolutely not a reason for to basically become a plant, you know, or put on the robe and turn off any kind of creative process that your consciousness wants. This is too much. You shouldn't do that. Okay? But a lot of these Pratyeka Buddhas been sending that message to people, and this is why it was not producing or changing society for better. And so therefore this message is not completely correct, and it shouldn't be sent anymore. So the age of gurus is over. Because it was another trap and another cope. Finding God, so to speak, it is not a solution to everything in your life. That's the basis, or it actually even gives you a position to start approaching life in the right way and creating structures that do work, creating your true success, soul desires, and not ego tantrums and all that stuff. It's just shift the perspective and you start living life in a holistic way. Then the use of your imagination must be applied, and then the use of your logics, your analytical mind must also be applied. Okay, now, and the fascinating part is that those problems, they're already within your consciousness, waiting for that appropriate faculty of your consciousness to be placed upon it. Because some to-do task, you may feel it within your consciousness as a little bit of attention, okay? And it is about to actually go and get that shit done, okay? It is not about to try to eliminate it with your alchemy. It's not about that. It's about just getting the shit done. That's all it's all about. But what I'm trying to say here is that that little angst that you have in the body to get your shit done, it is part of the body, and it's a healthy thing. Your body already knows what needs to be done and what is important to do. But it's not suffering. It's not something that can be fixed through your heart. Is just a little tension, which is a desire that is seeking for the release, which is a completion of that task. Okay, so I'm being very sort of clear about that. There's the world of the body that has its own management, and it does work through having a desire and completing of that desire. In the body realm, you're supposed to do that. You're supposed to be living life like that. You cannot use your logos to change the use of the logics. In other words, you have to use the logics, not the logos, for that particular case. Okay? I made in a previous video saying that don't confuse these deep feelings and emotions with the body emotions that are just arise and go, arise and go. This is normal and natural, and this is part of your human body. You have a human body. It has its own intelligence and it's operating. And when your heart is fine, you're still going to have these human body emotions. This is what I've noticed, that there are soul emotions and there are just human body emotions that are, like, I mean, you can see this in kids. They, for example, they interact and they're all playful. They don't have any kind of angst or hate for each other. But if somebody does something they don't like, there's an emotion and they might be upset about this, right? And the next moment they forgot about it, right? This is the body emotion that is appropriate and it's fine, and it's nothing to do with spirit. Well, I shouldn't say nothing to do with spirit, but it's not that thing. It's not that existential soul, angst that somebody did something to you and the rest of the day you are steaming about it, right? It's not that. So therefore the body is not supposed to be suppressed. And this is what I don't like when quote unquote spiritual people, they're suppressing the body. No. And they say, well, the body is bad for wanting these things. No, the body is not bad for wanting these things. You have to let the body be the body. Okay, don't confuse it with your soul. Okay? So speaking about body needs, like I said, they're there already. And they're natural. Now, if you don't use your attention for these negative feelings that are really happening deep and down in the soul, and you don't alchemize all these things, then the body will try to compensate for the lack of your heart, for the lack of your soul. And then it may seem that, it's a body need, but it's no longer a body need because you're addicted to it. Right? Because, for example, speaking about sex, because it's quite interesting. Sometimes, people say, well, the sex is not the bodily need. This is not what I observe. I watched carefully my own consciousness and other people's consciousness, and I found out through my own observation, not that nobody else figured that out, but I figured out just by watching my own consciousness and being very, very clear. It's like, okay, is this a body need or is this an emotional need to pacify like a negative feeling, right? And if everything is fine and calm in my heart, but the body has that desire, then I must look for the ways to fulfill that desire. And after it's been fulfilled, the body is happy. But there's nothing changed in my heart. I was peaceful before, I was peaceful after. Okay? But if I was kind of having the angst in my heart, and I did that with my body because of that, then I had the angst before, and then maybe I'll have some sort of like a depressive mood after, because I misappropriate my body to compensate for the lack of my logos, for the lack of my attention, the right attention of my heart. That's what happened at that moment, you see? So what I'm pointing at here is this big eye of the soul, not the soul, big eye of consciousness. When you're looking from that big eye of consciousness itself, that fourth eye, if you will, then you see those three eyes. And then you see them like, oh, I can point this one at that. And there's another problem arises. Oh no, I need to point the logics at that now. Now I need to point imagination at that. Then notice how these processes are happening. You are in your imagination, you are in your logics, or you are in your logos. Right? And eventually when you get the hang of it and you know what to point at which, that process is, I assume that process will become automatic. And that this is like, if you master this, there's nothing else for you to master. And in fact, if you don't master this, nothing else will work. This is the only point of perspective that does work. Okay? And you can't have that look, and you can't have this point of the perspective unless you really, really went all the way. And whenever there's that peace there, and when something's going on in your life, and then you can see that, okay, there's the mind analyzing things, and then you say, like, wait a second, I think we're just building up some toxic stuff in ourselves. Why don't we just face my heart at it for now? Okay, because this doesn't feel like that's a logical solution for this problem. Boom, you point your heart, everything's great. Then you see, like, well, there's this a little bit of incompletion feeling, like the to-do list that is already in your consciousness. See, oh, it wants to do that thing. All right, so let's do that thing. Let's see how to do that thing. Use our logics in, the might world, the action world, and you do that thing, and then boom, that thing is gone. So you see that there's a world of body that has its own desires that needs to be fulfilled, and you find the way to do this. You got to find the way to do this. And so that's the body game. And then there's the soul game, and there's a mind game. Okay. And you cannot live in the mind, or just say, like, imagination. This is what you see sometimes, like, with people. So right now, if you watch people, you'll see how are they operating, and you'll find that some, like, oh, this person is all logics, like it's just analyzing. Another people would be like, which is usually just becomes this type of another cope, and these astral projectors and OBEs experiencers, right? When they think, like, oh, now this is the gold nugget, like this is the answer. And so they just spend all imagination. We never really look at the negative feelings, and that there's this incoherence in there, and they're looking for the solution in the imagination to fix that incoherence there. Okay? But the mind does have a function and does have the imagination, but it's waiting for that quality energy to be there, and then it's going to create something out of that. And that's my desire. It's to be creating something. Right? And if you don't create something, the mind is not going to be happy with it as well. It wants to do things. So everything needs to be working in concert. And then you also have these people who are just about the heart, and they just, like, talk about it. It's just like, oh, this Heskaton Mampalom, and it's just like, well, the ego is this, and it's like, it's time to wake up. You know what I'm trying to say? It's all about that. It's no, wait a second. I mean, no, that's not the solution to life. There's a lot. You got to get shit done also. You got to imagine things. You got to reimagine the society. You can't just whine about society and saying that, like, oh, look at this, and let's just, like, the God is going to clean everything. See what I'm trying to say? Like, just getting that delusional approach, because they're not using their mind and they're not using their body. So they're just all about that. Neither of them is the answer. You have to use your logos, your magics, and your logics. That's the answer. Another thing I want to say, right? Those 3 joysticks of life. A woman plays it differently to a man. Like, let me say something. If you playing a character of a woman, your avatar is a woman, it is not a coincidence why you're playing that avatar. It is because you're trying to master the feminine side of the game. This is why you are a female. The same thing if you're a man. You did not choose that avatar, as just by accident. No, everything, because of that choice, boils down to what kind of polarization you are aiming in this life. Okay? And so, in other words, a woman has chosen to become more love. A man has chosen to become more truth. I'm certain of that. And I don't see a lot of people talk about this. It's like, well, become love, become love, become love. No. If you just become love, that love cannot be sustained without the truth. So it becomes very temporary and it dissolves again because there's no truth there. So no, you cannot. And as men, they're not supposed to be going to that way of love and loving everybody and then always feeling that something's off. No, you're polarized. You need to be polarized for the truth. Okay? That's the significance of your selection of your avatar. It's huge. You did not select the female body to still remain, for example, in the masculine energies and not learn the feminine energies. Because if you do that, you are not playing the game correctly, you're not evolving, and there's going to be some ego appearing because of that reason. Okay? And it's just physics, it's just metaphysics, it's just the way it is. And I'm dispelling this spell that was casted, who said that, well, in your soul you are basically a hermaphrodite, like you neither this neither that. And I did not found this to be the case all the way to the very primordial soup of consciousness, where that is true. But at that point there is nothing there of information yet. It's just a primordial soup. Sure, when you are in that ecstatic bliss and that ultimate peace, you're just pure light and you don't really have any kind of shape yet. Okay, then you can say, okay, that's a pure unity. And at that state of consciousness, you are neither a man, neither a woman kind of thing. But the second you just project into it, there appears to be the need to select the gender. Because otherwise the game cannot happen unless you select the gender. As soon as you select the gender, now everything about your soul is about that. So I'm making a big statement here, but through my own observation, I found it to be the case in the truth. Because through this maximum polarization is when you can have like the most success in the game of life. Okay? So if you're a woman, see what it's like or what it takes to be feminine in the soul, in the mind, and in the body on all of the levels. And if you're a man, see if you can get masculine in your soul, in your mind, and in the body on all the levels. And see what that brings you. I can guarantee you that you already had that feeling in your soul, and because it's there, it's just like that seed. It wants to sprout, but then you try to make it in something else. There's something very masculine that's trying to be born inside of you, and then society says no, and everybody is outside. You say they're like, no, this is not right, and that's not how you feel. So trust the way you feel. Don't believe in these psyops, and go all in as a man and all in as a woman. So there. And what does that mean in this particular case? As I was talking, that aperture of your soul, aperture of the mind, and aperture of the body is this. Logos and eros in your soul. So every time there's this negative, incoherent feeling in your soul, again, I'm just repeating myself, I'm just going to do the overview. The attention, it's very clear that you can place the attention to the source of it, and then there's the awareness, you can start periphery and foreground, background, foreground, right? And so if you're a woman, you're going to have way more success because it's going to be natural for you, because you already have that capacity and that the openness, the surrender. And that is very easy for a woman. If a man does that, there's no feeling of completion in the soul. You might get away for a little bit, but that thing that you did not face, that you had to go inside and pierce through, is going to come at you even stronger. It's going to come at you and say, like, look, motherfucker, you're not looking at it. You're not doing your man's job. Stop floating in the fucking boat like a kumbaya hippie. That's what your consciousness is going to do. So you're going to have to go and face that and dig through all this shit to find the truth. Because consciousness gets to the point where it has enough of your bullshit and makes you face all of that. Okay? And eventually you get a hang of it, and you're not shying away from any kind of negative feeling or that incoherent feeling that comes your way, and you are facing it with gusto, if you will. Okay? But you're also gonna need, when you go there, that type deep, in that deepest point of the fire, there is going to be that the only thing that can handle that intensity is a complete surrender, or that complete openness, complete stillness. Because sometimes you're going to have challenges at that level that you're going to have to go all the way to it and connect to that ultimate silence, not a little bit, because there's levels of intensity. And some challenges, they will not resolve until there's a complete connection between attention and awareness, or the foreground and the background. But you went through the masculine way so deeply that the courage was so intense that the surrender just appeared. Because it's almost like in those mythological stories, like you pull out your Excalibur sword, so to speak, because you earn that love, okay, through courage. Love appeared because you demonstrated the courage. It's not even a demonstration, is not the right word. You used courage where it's supposed to be used, and used all the way, and love appeared. If you don't do this, what's going to happen? You're going to start seeking for that love through other means. Okay? And that may be like, say, chasing a skirt and stuff like that. But if you go all the way, the love appears as aura within your consciousness, and then is going to be filled up as your imagination, maybe dreams, maybe lucid dreams, maybe astral projection, and all sorts of experiences. It's going to fill that aura based on the way it is. It's going to give it a shape. Your mind's going to do that. And that's when you use your mind. This is where you go into the mind. You have to go into the mind then, right? When that feeling is amazing, you give it a light. You see, okay, what is this? How does this feeling look like? This intense feeling, how does it look like? And you start seeing colors and all these things, and you let it sprout, let it become something. Then you use your mind. Okay? And then in life, it will come to you also these little desires, like, go do this, go do that. And that's a to-do list, and you do that. Right? And you got to do this. I've noticed that sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't listen to my body desires, and I don't do it. And it's not okay, because you can't, like, plant the seed, water the seed, see the flowers, blooming, the fruit being produced, and then you're not there to pick it up. Right? So you got to use all three for the complete experience and fulfillment of your soul desire. And that is a true success. And so for a woman in the imagination world, the woman gets that feeling of bliss, which is true, to becoming maximum love. and then that thing appears. And right, and so they meet in the middle, each one of them going their destined way. Man became a truth, a woman became love, and then poof, they connected the right way through the polarization, not going, and trying to become like a half a man and half a woman, and to get that neutralization rather than polarization. Okay, only have 4 minutes left. I have no space in my phone, but hopefully I'm gonna finish it. Okay, now right, so I was talking about the body needs. I just want to finish real quick with saying that there is a need in the body for these desires. I include sex as a part of it. The body, you see, this is why you have to watch, like, what is actually your body desires, and then you're going to figure out what are your actual body desires, not because of the book, or because you found them there. And you can see, like, okay, there's a desire, it's there, but it's nothing to do with that background. The feeling is like, okay, so that's just the body desire that I have to fulfill. And you do, and it's okay. It's not sort of like evil. That bodily pleasure that the body wanted is okay. It can become evil if you don't alchemize it. Then the body is going to have to compensate for it, right? And I found out that the body does have a need for sex. It's a bodily need. Like, and this is what I found out to be the case. It's super interesting. The body has a need for sex. The mind, imagination, has a need for romance, and the heart has a need for love. Okay, and so there are these games that both genders are playing: the soul, the mind, and the body. And so you can also notice sometimes the attraction. You may meet somebody and there's a body attraction, and it's just like sexual, but it's not romantic. So that's the connection there. You may also meet somebody who's like sexual and romantic, but there's no love there, right? And then finally, hopefully, you meet the trifecta, where there is love, there is romance, and there is sex on all the 3 levels. Okay? And so there. But when you live your life and you don't have love, you can have romance and sex, but that's just going to be romance and sex, And I've noticed, like, when it comes to sex, the actual bodily need, like intrinsic bodily need, it's just my theory that it's monthly, because you have this menstruation cycles that are monthly, right? So it's minimum, the real genuine your body need is monthly, and if it doesn't get that, the body starts malfunctioning. You can't focus, and all these things. So there's this minimal need, and then if the body gets that is fine. Okay, now it doesn't have to be. Sometimes, like, it goes into imagination, and your mind takes over. If you cannot have sex in the physical world for whatever reason, your mind takes over, and you have that release through imagination, which your body also feels. Anyway, guys, I cannot record anymore because my phone says that that's enough. But yeah, that's my message. It's this: look at the world through the big eye, and you'll see that you can have the capacity to use the soul, the mind, and the body, and use it appropriately for every particular time-space experience. Okay? That's enough for today.